It is now 114 years since Walter Bramble, then aged 18, set up as a cut and deliver butcher, delivering beef by boat and by horse and sulky to Morpeth, Raymond Terrace, Seaham and Newcastle. Within 2 years, Walter bought land in Blaine Street, Newcastle West, now Hunter Street, and began providoring ships, using fast boats to win orders. He was quick to see that other butchers did not have their own transport and began to cart their supplies. By 1884, Walter had built a 2-storey building at 685 Hunter Street West. The sign is still there today. In 1889, he started a carrier service between Newcastle and Sydney, and by 1909 had moved from butchering to transport, with more than 200 horses and a variety of wagons. In 1911, the first steam lorry was purchased, and by 1915, horses and steam trucks were replaced with the new chain-driven Fiat motor lorries. By 1916, Walter's 3 sons had joined the business, and the company was known as W.E. Bramble & Sons, Carriers, Shipping Agents and Storers. Today, the Brambles group of companies is the leading materials handling and movement service organisation in Australia. But Walter Bramble's simple philosophy of 1875 still remains: service to industry and the community. In many areas, Brambles literally changed the face of Newcastle, as we shall see next week. By 1925, the population of Newcastle had grown to 90,000. Brambles had diversified extensively, influencing many areas of commercial and industrial development. Their introduction of first steam, then conventional motor-driven haulage lorries, led to automotive service and the establishment of motor garages. In 1929, they transported these large, heavy sections of yellow freestone from Newcastle Rail to the site of what is still one of the city's most impressive buildings, Newcastle City Hall. After Walter Bramble died in 1930, his son Walter Jr. took the chair, and one of his favourite projects was Newcastle Showground. He donated large supplies of labour and fill to build and maintain the showground. Brambles also had a contract with the New South Wales government for the maintenance and repair of Nobby's breakwater and the entrance to Port Hunter. During World War II, they worked tirelessly to keep cargo moving, and the rapid technological changes during the war led the company into an even wider range of services in the late 40s and early 50s. But during this explosion of expansion and diversification, they did not forget the one vital ingredient which gave Brambles its vitality and forward thrust: people. Next week, we'll take a look at some of Brambles' families. I suppose you could call the Beaton family a Brambles family. This is Troy Beaton, apprentice mechanic. How long have you been here, Troy?
No, a couple of years now.
And this is Troy's father, John. How long have you been here, John?
15 years, first as a truck driver and now supervisor.
And then there's John's father, Bill Beaton. How long were you here, Bill?
34 years, but my dad was here before that, and I had an uncle here way back before then, and there's always been a Beaton with Brambles.
Then there's the Jeffries family. Father Neville, who's a supervisor, and son Neil, who drives a Brambles truck. When you start for long-timers and jobs are passed from generation to generation, the company must be doing something right. What's the most important thing to you about working for Brambles, Neville?
Security, I guess. That's why I got both my boys to start at Brambles.
It's that same security that made Brambles #1 in transport and heavy haulage. Brambles can supply and lease plant, mobile cranes and special purpose units for most transport needs. They can even take over whole distribution systems, right down to loading, transporting and unloading your containers using Brambles forklifts, Australia's largest rental fleet. Despite the size of the organisation now, Brambles still retain close ties with the Newcastle community, as you'll see next week. As a youth, dragline operator Ray Parkinson lived in this area. It was originally swampland, teeming with wildlife. Then over the years it was filled to create playing fields. When Brambles set out to recreate the original swamp, Ray's childhood memories were invaluable in re-establishing the natural land contours. Thousands of people now visit the Shortland Wetland Centre each year and enjoy a leisurely picnic lunch by Brambles Pond. Brambles is proud to be a sponsor of this important project. Community involvement is and always will be an integral part of their activities.
For the harbour foreshore development, Brambles transported and lifted these full-grown palm trees into position. This massive dragline bucket was recently placed beside the Regional Museum's puppet head display, which they transported here in 1988. And Brambles transported and lifted this loco and old rail wagons into position to form a permanent display. Brambles have long supported Australian industry and mining too. They can provide plant hire for any lift and shift operation on construction and industrial sites. Their crane fleet includes hydraulic truck, tractor and rough terrain types. For heavy haulage there's flat tops, low loaders and special purpose equipment to lift loads of more than 200 tonnes. And Brambles have the biggest forklift hire fleet in Australia, with lift capacities up to 32 tonnes.
Next week we see how Brambles look after some unusual items. This is Brambles' storage division. They've been storing bits and pieces for other companies since the 30s. Companies like Gninens. And this would have to be the world's largest train set.
When these and many other components are assembled, you have Gninen's revolutionary Tangara train.
Brambles store parts and equipment for many Newcastle companies. The Electricity Commission, Gove Aluminium, Tube Makers, Bullitt&Alice. They store pipe and steel patterns, dragline parts, aluminium, drums of naphthalene. But it's not all related to industry. These 24 bales of hay are collected each week, taken to a local nightclub for a country and western night, and returned the next day. Brambles can store long or short term, and their clients have the assurance that their goods are in safe hands. They also have the additional benefit of Brambles' lift and shift capabilities. Their goods can be collected, transported and stored using Brambles' fleet of cranes, forklifts and trucks. They can be transported back to the company or on-forwarded in the same manner. Brambles' storage division has experienced tremendous growth over the last few years, but there's still room for more. So if you've got a spare train set or two, next week, before you shift it, you've got to lift it. After you spend a lot of time and hard-earned cash building a boat, you need to be sure it goes in the water in one piece. That's where one of these comes in handy. Oh, and someone to drive it.
Brambles cranes have put a lot of boats into the water, big and small, and they're a familiar sight around Newcastle industry. Brambles introduced the first motorised crane to Newcastle and now have the biggest fleet of mobile cranes in Australia. With a capacity of up to 50 tonnes, there isn't a lot they can't handle, and if the job is bigger, Brambles Newcastle can call on one of their other divisions to boost the lift capacity to a couple of 100 tonnes. That's how they can shift these bitcher pave tanks and this 100-tonne saltwater pump from a Raring power station. Brambles Crane Division is currently at work on the Sulphide Corporation major refit. Pile driving operations at Stockland Mall and recently completed the more unusual task of erecting and dismantling the bicentennial travelling exhibition in Newcastle, Dubbo and Orange, harking back to the 20s when their services were employed to transport travelling shows and exhibitions from town to town. With a modern, well-equipped and service fleet, experienced operators and ancillary equipment, Brambles can tackle any kind of lift. In fact, Brambles can put together a total lift and shift package, the only Newcastle company to offer an integrated crane and transport service.
Next week, we'll see how World War II was partially responsible for the biggest forklift fleet in Australia. During World War II, the only organisation using more vehicles than Brambles was the Army. Brambles men and machines were on a 24-hour schedule as contractors to the armed forces in the movement of materials and the building of earthworks for Army establishments. But the war took a heavy toll on the Brambles family. Walter Bramble Jr. died in 1941. His brother Alan in 1946. Milton took over briefly but retired due to ill health in 1948. Wing Commander Thomas McBride Price became Managing Director. Alan Humble, company accountant since 1937, was appointed General Manager. In 1951, the company purchased 8 1942 war surplus forklift trucks. This was the first operational forklift fleet in Newcastle, servicing industry and shipping. Now Brambles are Australia's largest forklift rental company, with capacities ranging from 2 to 35 tonnes. They are essential to Brambles transport and unload operations for local companies exporting overseas. Brambles can supply forklift trucks to suit just about any lifting requirements. Many companies prefer to lease their fleet from Brambles, saving on capital outlay, repairs and maintenance. Brambles will even purchase an existing fleet, then rent it back to the company. Next week we go back to the days when 200 horsepower meant 200 horses. In 1905, Brambles' transport division consisted of 200 horses and a variety of wagons. As carriers and contractors, Brambles were involved in a wide range of activities. They were the first carriers to be contracted to the Sydney Soap and Candle Company. Nearly 90 years later, Brambles still carry for that same company, now known as Lever and Kitchen. Horses gradually gave way to steam, then motor lorries. Brambles' volume of transport contracts became so large that the entire staff seemed to have just one common goal, to live up to the Brambles motto of keep moving. During the 40s, Brambles undertook haulage of all kinds, from industry to household removals. In 1950, the last pair of horses were sold, and Brambles installed two-way radio, wondering how they'd ever survive without it. In 1955, Brambles provided a vital emergency service during the Maitland floods. In 1956, they moved from Blaine Street to their present location at Carrington. And in 1971, Bob Croker, the last horse wagon driver, retired after 40 years of service. His son Gary is a Brambles supervisor. Today the Carrington yards bustle with the constant movement of Brambles transport. Tabletops, semis, low loaders, they serve light and heavy industry shipping and mining. Next week, building some vital links with Newcastle. The next time you're driving along the Newcastle to Sydney Expressway, take a little time out to think about the amount of work that went into building it. We all tend to take it for granted, except those of us who remember the old highway.
Brambles took part in the construction of the section of expressway between Calgary and Mount White, where they excavated with mechanical shovels and dumpers, supported by a fleet of tippers. The Newcastle team also worked on excavations for NBN3, the ABC, and the King Street car park. Current projects include the new trotting track at Broadmeadow. Brambles plant is also involved in road building and road maintenance for private industry and for the Department of Main Roads. In the 50s, Brambles embarked on one of their greatest earthworks projects, the reclamation of an area of wasteland, including 5 islands, for BHP. This area is better known today as Kooragang Island. Today, Brambles plant is working on roads, quarries and mining operations throughout the Newcastle and Hunter Valley areas. Their plant division can offer a variety of tippers, loaders and graders to meet the wide range of construction and industrial requirements in the Hunter Valley. Brambles can also offer attractive industrial leaseback and hire arrangements to meet immediate and future equipment requirements.
Next week, Brambles meets the big Australian. Brambles' links with BHP go right back to 1915. As BHP took up land on the Newcastle River frontage, Brambles helped with the reclamation of low-lying areas. They then moved on to providing auxiliary services. As the years passed, their work for BHP demanded more and bigger equipment for materials handling within the steelworks. On June 1st, 1989, Brambles commenced a major 5-year contract to provide transport services to BHP Newcastle. Under this contract, Brambles will handle more than 2 million tonnes of raw materials and provide all road transport service inside the works, a task previously performed by BHP's own road fleet and other contractors. Brambles will also continue to provide their traditional range of services to BHP, tippers, front-end loaders and semi-trailers. The improved efficiencies this contract will provide to BHP are the outcome of a major study Brambles conducted on BHP's transport operations. Brambles have now purchased the BHP road fleet, including this old beauty. This contract ensures that Brambles continue to be the major materials handling company in the Newcastle region. It also strengthens and maintains an association started by Walter Bramble himself over 70 years ago. Next week we look at some of Brambles' other divisions in Newcastle, throughout Australia and overseas. The growth of Walter Bramble's company during his own lifetime was phenomenal, but I think Walter himself would be amazed at the diversity and size of Brambles' operation today. In Newcastle alone, Brambles has 8 divisions. Brambles Equipment, specialising in manned and unmanned equipment hire services and specialised transport services. Brambles Transport and Freight Forwarding, providing intra and interstate transport services. Cleanaway, industrial waste removal, cleaning and liquid waste disposal. CHEP Australia, formerly the Commonwealth Handling Equipment Pool, acquired in 1958. Grace Removals, household and office removals and storage services. Fenwick Tugs, marine towage services. Gardner Perrott, industrial cleaning and painting services, and Brackett's Proprietary Limited, specialists in metals recovery from slag. Throughout Australia, Brambles' main activities encompass transport, industrial equipment hire, removals, security, materials handling, waste disposal and marine services. Overseas, there's CHEP Handling in Europe and North America, Group C AIB Rail Rental Management and Repair throughout Europe, Cleanaway in the UK, and ENSCO, a newly acquired interest in the USA, specialising in high-temperature incineration systems. But none of this would have been possible without people and their commitment to the company. Walter would have been proud. Next week, we look back at some past history and talk about what lies ahead for Brambles Newcastle. Over the last 11 weeks, we've looked at many areas of the Brambles operation, both past and present. We've seen how it all started, met some of the people so vital to the overall picture, looked at the technological developments which have taken place throughout the years, and examined some important Newcastle connections. Now it's time to look forward. This is Mark Apthorpe, Manager, Brambles Equipment, Newcastle. Mark, what's the future for Brambles in the Hunter Valley?
We intend to further expand our role in Newcastle and the Hunter Valley and to be part of the growth that we expect in this area, as well as expanding our traditional businesses of transport, cranes, forklifts, plants. We also intend to search for new products and new technologies to better serve the businesses of Newcastle and the Hunter Valley. It's been one of the strengths of Brambles over the years to always be at the forefront of technology in their respective businesses. Technology and people. Let's not forget the people. It really has been the people throughout the years that have made Brambles great, and certainly will be there in the future.
That's the Brambles story so far. Believe me, there's a lot more to come. It all started with a young man, a rowboat, a horse and cart, right here on the banks of the mighty Hunter River.